Repeating the breaking news this afternoon, the report by Central Australian Controller Darrell Anderson will be released next week. That follows a meeting between the Prime Minister and Natasha Files this afternoon. Let's go live to Darwin. I'm joined by the Shadow Minister for Health, Remote Housing and Town Camps, Bill Yan. Bill, thanks for your time. The meeting held between the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister, it's clear that Mr Albanese wants those alcohol bans reinstated. You'd be pleased with that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Kieran. That's some good news for the people of Central Australia. Back in May when we debated this in Parliament, we called on the Territory Labor government to keep these bans in place in some form, or at least change them to make sure that the people in the town camps and our communities were protected. But they went bull at a gate and decided that they knew best and removed these bans completely without putting any safety net in place for the people out in the communities and in the bush, and particularly in the town camps. And sadly now we've seen the result of removing that legislation and not putting something in place to protect the people. And of course, not only are the people in the town camps and the communities paying the price, but the people of Alice Springs, but more importantly, we're seeing that increased harm to women and children in our communities, which the government were warned about. They were warned about by us, the opposition. They were warned about by peak Aboriginal organisations and health bodies. Everybody warned the Files Labor government that this would happen, but they chose not to believe them and just push through.
So what do you put that down to then, Bill, given, and I've spoken to some of those representative bodies and individuals you're talking about that said they've been warning for months, if not years, about the impact of just pulling out the alcohol ban overnight without any safety measures. Why did the government not take heed of that advice?
I really don't know, Kieran. Now, I know that senior public servants, prior to this coming to Parliament, gave advice to Cabinet not to do this, to change the opt-in, opt-out model and to keep some restrictions in place to stop this from happening, stop what we're seeing today happening. That Cabinet, those 9 people, chose not to take that advice. And I think it's just plain arrogance that the Cabinet, the Chief Minister, thought they knew better than everybody else. We'll just change this legislation, take it away, no safety net, no supports to the people out in the bush and in the communities and on those town camps. And everything will be fine. We know best. They didn't take the advice of the people who actually knew. Those peak health organisations and Aboriginal organisations knew the harm that this would cause by its instant removal. And sadly, we're seeing that on the ground today. The harrowing stories coming out, particularly from the nurse recently, about the child's sexual abuse that she's seen coming through the doors of the hospital, and the doctors saying some of the injuries and stuff that they're seeing coming through our accident and emergency departments. It's absolutely horrifying. And the fact that this government in the Territory was warned that this sort of stuff might happen really beggars belief that they pushed through, and they still won't own up to this. The report to the Prime Minister has been leaked, and we all know that some form of alcohol restrictions are going to come back, and probably restrictions in the form of the previous Stronger Futures legislation are going to come back. But they still won't up to it and say, we made a mistake. They won't up and say, we're sorry to all those people in the town camps, sorry to those people in the communities, and sorry to the women and children of Central Australia because we got it wrong. They won't still own up to that. And that really makes people in the Territory very, very angry.
Bill, you know the town better than most. You've lived there for a long time. Your kids grew up there. What's the mood like among residents of Alice Springs? Is there any sense of hope that when those bans are reinstated or restrictions are reinstated, that things can get back to the town that it was? And then the further question I want to ask you about, because you've looked at this area as well for a long time, how does the government, state, territory and federal, deal with the intergenerational issues here? Because obviously alcohol's a symptom, but you've got to deal with those other issues like education and services.
And that's right. Look, this is a bigger issue than just alcohol. Housing, health, all plays a part in this and to creating healthy communities, healthy people, healthy families. Now, they need to deal with the alcohol as part of this as an issue first up. But the government been given over $1 billion to deliver a housing program across the Territory, and they're falling behind on the milestones on that. We're coming towards the end of that, and they've only spent half of the money. The governments can't seem to organise and deliver on the projects that they're given by the federal government, and of course it's shared money. So alcohol plays a huge part, and sadly in my previous role within corrections, we've seen more than half of the people in custody were in for domestic violence related offences. So, and they're also linked to alcohol. So we need good treatment programs in place to A, work with alcohol, but then B, to work with some of the other issues underlying there, which is that domestic violence abuse that we're seeing, which is a scourge on our community, which again then hurts the women and children here in the Territory. There needs to be some serious investment, and this government needs to look at how it's using the money it's given from the federal government to deliver those programs and services out into our communities. But the people in the bush, they're worried about health, they're worried about housing, and they're worried about their roads. And that all comes down to creating those healthy communities, healthy families. Because if we can get our communities back on track and provide some economic development out there, then all of a sudden they're places that people want to be and places that people want to live and to raise their families, because there's some, I suppose, development happening out in the bush. So government needs to focus on that. And then I think everything else will certainly fall into place as far as the development of our communities further.
You're giving people a sense of purpose and hope. Shadow Minister for Health, Remote Housing and Town Camps, Bill Yan, thanks for your time this afternoon. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kieran. Thanks for having us on.